Hi, my name is Sienna Caldwell, and I'm 36 years old. Today, I'm going to tell you how my own father forced me out of the company we built together, handed my position to my stepbrother, and then came crawling back after he lost everything. But before we get to that moment, the one where he looked me in the eye and chose them over me, you need to understand how we got here. You need to understand how much I gave up to stand on the other side of that desk. You need to know what it cost. Because betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It happens like a slow leak, quiet, steady, invisible, until the ceiling caves in. And sometimes the person swinging the hammer is the same man who once tucked you into bed at night. My dad, Robert Caldwell, built Caldwell refrigeration systems from the ground up. We specialized in commercial refrigeration, unsexy, industrial, necessary. Grocery chains, warehouses, food processing plants. We kept other people's livelihoods from spoiling in the heat. I was there from day one. I filed parts invoices the summer I turned 18, worked in quality control during college, answered customer calls when most of my friends were still waiting tables. After graduation, I didn't go chase some shiny job in a different city. I came home. To the factory, to my dad. To the company we pretended wasn't our coping mechanism. My mother died when I was 17. Breast cancer. It took her faster than anyone expected, and when she went, it was like someone unplugged the sun in our house. My father buried himself in work, so did I. Caldwell refrigeration became our shared language. Instead of talking about grief, we talked about production quotas. Instead of talking about how much it hurt to see my mother's handwriting on old grocery lists, we talked about supplier contracts. We called it building something that matters. Maybe it was. Maybe it was just survival. Either way, we rebuilt together. We grew the business, hired over 200 employees, and by my early 30s, I had earned my way to vice president of manufacturing. Not because I was the owner's daughter, but because I knew that plant better than I knew my own apartment. I missed vacations. I missed girls' trips. I missed more than one anniversary dinner with my boyfriend Ethan because a line went down or a shipment was delayed. He used to joke that the real love of my life wore steel-toed boots and smelled like refrigerant. He wasn't wrong, but I thought it was worth it. I thought we were partners, my father and I. I thought I was building my future. Then he met Vanessa. I was 30 when he started dating her. She was 48, twice divorced, with a grown son named Brandon. On paper, she worked in interior design. In reality, she seemed to specialize in expensive shoes and calculated compliments. I tried at first. I really did. My father's grief had hollowed him out for years, and if Vanessa made him laugh again, who was I to judge? She came to the factory one afternoon to drop off lunch. She swept into the office on a cloud of perfume and designer leather, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. "This place is impressive," she said, running perfectly manicured fingers along the framed photos of our early days. "Robert told me his daughter basically runs the whole operation." I smiled, a little awkward. "We run it together." She tilted her head. "Of course." Brandon came a few weeks later. Tall, polished, with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to scrape frost off a windshield at 5 a.m. to make it to the plant before the first shift. "Great setup you've got here," he said, wandering through my department like he was touring a museum. "Dad's lucky to have you." Lucky. Interesting choice of word. From a man who hadn't lifted a single pallet in his life. They got married within 10 months. Fast. Too fast. But my father hadn't looked that light in years, and I told myself that was what mattered. Vanessa started showing up to company events, then to more meetings, then to the executive retreat that had always been just me and Dad. "Robert, you work too hard," she would say, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You should delegate more, enjoy life." At first it sounded harmless, maybe even wise. Then it became, "Brandon has his MBA, you know. He's looking for opportunities in the industrial sector." I should have seen it coming. 8 months after the wedding, my father hired Brandon as a management consultant. No interview, no qualifications review, just an email from HR. "Please welcome Brandon Avery as our new consultant at $92,000 a year." He came in 3 days a week, spent most of his time in my father's office, and produced one report. One. A 25-page document that concluded we should outsource half our production to a cheaper overseas manufacturer. I read it twice, waiting to find the joke. "Dad, this is insane," I said in his office, my hands gripping the report so tightly the pages crinkled. "Our quality control is our primary selling point. Outsourcing would destroy everything we've built." Across the desk, Brandon leaned back in his chair. perfectly relaxed. I think you're being a little closed-minded, Sienna. Globalization is the future. My father's jaw tightened. Brandon makes valid points. You're being resistant to innovation. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I'm being realistic. I've run manufacturing operations for 6 years. I know what works here. Dad's eyes cooled. Maybe that's the problem. You've become too comfortable in your position. There it was, the first crack I couldn't plaster over. From that day forward, I felt Vanessa even when she wasn't in the room. In the way my father repeated buzzwords he'd never cared about before. In the way Brandon dropped by my production meetings with unsolicited suggestions. In the way Dad stopped asking, "What do you think, Sienna?" and started asking, "Have you run this by Brandon?" 3 months later, Brandon was promoted to Senior Management Consultant, a title we basically invented for him so HR could justify the raise. He started sitting in on executive meetings, offering opinions on departments he didn't understand, criticizing processes he'd never worked a day inside of. Our CFO, Patricia, pulled me aside after one particularly painful session, where Brandon suggested we liquidate our spare parts inventory to unlock cash flow. "Sienna, what is happening?" she whispered, closing my office door behind her. Liquidating spare parts is operational suicide in manufacturing. Our clients depend on rapid replacements. "I know," I said, rubbing my temples. "I'm trying to handle it." "Handle it faster," she said quietly. People are getting nervous. People. My people. The ones who'd watched me grow from line supervisor to VP, who knew I'd earned every promotion. They were watching me, and I was watching my father slip further and further away. I tried one more time to fix it. We met for dinner at my childhood home, though Vanessa had redecorated every inch of it. Gone were my mother's floral curtains, replaced by glass and chrome and abstract art that looked like someone had lost an argument with a paint roller. "Dad, we need to talk about Brandon's role," I said, sitting across from him at the long, glossy table. "He doesn't have the experience for the positions you're giving him." "Oh, Sienna." Vanessa floated in from the kitchen, right on cue, carrying a bottle of wine. "Brandon has an MBA from Northwestern. What do you have? A state school degree?" "I have 14 years of hands-on experience," I said evenly, "and an MBA from the same executive program Dad completed. You know that." She blinked, slow and wounded. "Robert, are you going to let her speak to me like that?" My father's expression hardened. "Sienna, you're out of line. Vanessa is my wife. Brandon is family now." "So am I said. "I'm your daughter." "Then act like it," he snapped. "Stop undermining your stepbrother's contributions." I left that night with a sour taste in my mouth and a new, ugly truth lodged behind my ribs. I had lost my father to whatever game Vanessa was playing, but I hadn't yet understood how far he was willing to go. That came months later, in the same office where he would eventually fire me. "Meredith, excuse me, Sienna," he said, correcting himself with an impatience that stung more than it should have. "You directly contradicted Brandon's directive on the Riverside cooling project." "Because he doesn't have authority over manufacturing operations," I shot back. "That's my department. Actually," he slid a document across the desk. "Effective immediately, Brandon Avery is promoted to Senior Vice President of Operations. He will be overseeing multiple departments, including manufacturing." For a heartbeat, all I could hear was the hum of the HVAC system and the faint thud of machinery from the plant. "You're putting him above me," I whispered. "You'll both report directly to me," my father said. "Think of it as shared leadership responsibility." "Dad, he's been here 2 years," I said. "I've been here 14. Brandon smiled, actually smiled, like this was all some delicious joke. "This isn't personal, Sienna," he said. "It's business. Dad needs fresh perspectives to stay competitive." Fresh perspectives. From a man who'd never worn a hard hat on our production floor. "You've nearly cost us 4 major accounts with your perspectives," I snapped. "That's enough," my father cut in, his voice like ice. "Sienna, you're becoming a liability to this organization. Accept the new structure or reconsider your position here." I should have quit right then. I should have walked out of that office with my dignity intact. Instead, I stayed. I stayed and watched the ceiling leak. I stayed until it finally caved in, on a Tuesday morning in October, when my father looked me in the eye and chose my stepbrother over his own daughter. But that's where the real story begins. The Tuesday morning it finally broke, the sky over the plant was a flat, colorless gray. The kind of morning where you couldn't tell if it was going to rain or just hang heavy over you all day like a bad mood. I parked in my usual spot right where I could see the loading dock and the main entrance. Habit, control. If I could see the doors, I could see who was coming and going. For 14 years, that view meant stability. That morning, it felt like a countdown. Inside, the factory floor buzzed with the familiar rhythm of clanking metal, humming compressors, and shouted instructions. My people nodded at me as I walked by. Andre raised a hand in greeting. "Morning, Sienna." "Morning," I said, forcing a smile. "How's Riverside looking?" His face tightened. That account again. "We're on schedule. Or we were until Brandon told me to cut overtime." I stopped walking. "He what?" "Yesterday afternoon," Andre said, voice low. "Said the overtime was bloated and we needed to protect margins. I reminded him you'd already approved it. He told me he outranked you now." A pulse throbbed at my temple. "Ignore him. I'm still VP of manufacturing. You keep my original plan. Riverside's deadline is critical for their summer season. We miss this. We lose them." Andre nodded, but I could see the strain around his eyes, the confusion, the quiet question. Who am I supposed to listen to? I didn't have an answer I believed in anymore. But I had my title, my history, my rage. Sometimes that's all you have left. By 9:30, I was in my office, halfway through an email to Riverside's project manager, when my phone buzzed. It was my father's assistant. "Hey, Sienna, can you come to Robert's office now, please?" No explanation, no calendar invite. Just that clipped, careful tone people use when they know something you don't. My stomach dropped. "Sure," I said. "I'll be right there." As I walked down the executive hallway, the one with the framed awards and the glossy photos of Dad shaking hands with clients, I felt like I was walking through a museum of a life that wasn't mine anymore. At the end of the hall, my father's door was closed. It used to be open, always. Even when he was buried in paperwork, he'd wave people in, tell them to sit down, ask how their kids were. Today, the closed door made a statement. I knocked once and stepped inside. My father sat behind his desk. Vanessa perched in one of the leather chairs, legs crossed, looking like she was there for moral support at a spa consultation. Brandon occupied the other chair, the one I used to sit in, leaning back as if he owned the room. There was a manila folder on the desk in front of my father. The atmosphere felt like a funeral. "Sienna," Dad said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Have a seat." I didn't sit. "What's going on?" He sighed, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times in late-night negotiations. Except this time, it wasn't conspiratorial. It was resigned. "The board has decided to restructure executive leadership," he said. "We need to streamline operations to stay competitive." My heart started pounding in my ears. "Okay," I said slowly. "So what does that mean for my department?" "It means," he continued, eyes fixed on the folder instead of my face, "that Brandon is being promoted to Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer." I blinked. "That's my job," I said. "I'm VP of Manufacturing. Operations falls under my division." "Was," he corrected quietly. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words didn't sound real. They floated in the air between us, like someone had pumped invisible gas into the room and I was waiting to see if it would explode. "You're firing me," I said. "We're offering you a transition package," he said quickly, as if that made it better. 60 days severance, and we'll provide a reference letter. This is the best decision for the company." I felt something inside me snap. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Dad," I said, hearing my voice from outside my own body. "I built this division with you." "You're being dramatic, Sienna," he said. The exact same phrase he'd used the day he promoted Brandon over me. Brandon deserves this opportunity. 14 years. 14 years of missed holidays, late nights, and weekends on the factory floor, and my father had the audacity to call me dramatic. I turned to Brandon. His expression was polite, neutral, but his eyes gave him away. There was satisfaction there, triumph. He didn't say sorry, he didn't even pretend. Vanessa laid a hand on my father's shoulder, her expression soft and pained, like she was the one being wronged. "Robert, this is hard for all of us," she said gently, "but sometimes you have to make tough choices for the future." The future. Apparently I wasn't in it. "Dad, please," I tried one last time. "Think about what you're doing. You're not just firing an employee. You're throwing away your daughter." His jaw tightened. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items," he said. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, to laugh and say, "God, Sienna, you think I'd actually do that?" To remember nights we slept in this building during install crises, eating vending machine chips and planning the future. He didn't. The only sound was the faint tick of the clock on the wall. I grabbed the folder, turned on my heel, and walked out before security arrived. I would not give them the satisfaction of watching me dragged out of the building I had helped build. In my office, I shut the door, locked it, and slid down against it until I was sitting on the carpet. For a moment, I just stared at my desk. The photos, the coffee mug with a chipped handle, the framed print my boyfriend Ethan had given me. You are not behind. It felt like a cruel joke now. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at his name on the screen, then flipped the phone over. I couldn't hear his voice. Not yet. Not when I could barely hear my own. Instead, I opened the folder. The transition package was an insult dressed up in corporate jargon. 60 days severance pay. Health insurance canceled effective immediately. The company car, a Lexus ES I'd earned through performance, had to be returned by Friday. The stock options I'd been promised, the ones I'd planned my future around, suddenly subject to revised vesting schedules, which meant I got nothing. Even my 401k matching stopped accruing the moment they'd signed the termination paperwork. I was 36 years old, unemployed, and betrayed by the man who had taught me that loyalty and precision were everything. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. Ethan, how's your morning, love? Survived the Brandon circus? I stared at the words until they blurred. How was my morning? My morning was watching my entire life collapse in an office that used to smell like my father's aftershave and cheap coffee. My morning was realizing the man who had once said, "As long as I'm alive, you'll have a place here," had just signed me out of existence. I typed and deleted 3 different replies before tossing the phone onto the desk. I couldn't tell him yet, not until I could say the words out loud without breaking. I stood up on shaking legs and looked around the office. Every item had a story. The first blueprint I ever approved, pinned crooked on the wall. The stress ball shaped like a compressor that Andre had won at a trade show and dropped on my desk like a trophy. The photo of Dad and me at the grand opening of our second facility, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning, confetti still in our hair. I pulled that photo down. For a second, I pressed my thumb over the younger version of his face, trying to remember what it felt like to trust him. Then I put the frame face down in the box. There was a knock at the door. "Ms. Caldwell, it's security. We're here to escort you out." Of course they were. "Give me 5 minutes," I called back, forcing my voice not to shake. "I'll be ready." They murmured something polite and retreated. I grabbed what mattered, a few personal photos, a notebook full of scribbled ideas, the framed print from Ethan. I left everything that belonged to them where it was. When I stepped out into the hallway with the box in my arms, the 2 security guards fell into step beside me. They weren't unkind, just professional, detached. As we passed the break room, conversation stuttered. Heads turned, screens paused. People who had known me for a decade looked away, like eye contact might be contagious. Patricia appeared from her office, eyes blazing. "What is going on?" she demanded. I gave a bitter laugh. "Ask your new COO." Her gaze flicked to the box in my arms, then to the security guards. Her face hardened. For a second, she looked like she might march down the hall and throw the manila folder back at my father's face. Instead, she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Sienna, this isn't over. Not really." "It feels over," I said. She shook her head. "He made his choice. That doesn't mean you're done. It just means you're free." Free. It sounded like a joke, like those motivational posters in HR. The guards shifted awkwardly. "I'll call you," she said. "When you can breathe, we'll talk." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then I walked. Through the hallway, past the framed awards, past the photo of my father accepting an industry prize with me standing beside him, younger and hopeful and stupid. Out through the lobby, out past the Caldwell refrigeration logo I'd once been so proud to see on the wall. Out into the gray, heavy morning that suddenly felt like it had teeth. In the parking lot, I set the box in the back seat of my car and slid behind the wheel. For a long time, I didn't start the engine. I stared at the factory building, the loading dock, the smudge of oil near the side door, the window of my office, and realized something that knocked the breath out of me. I had not just lost a job. I had lost the story I'd been telling myself about who I was. If I wasn't Robert Caldwell's right hand, the daughter who would inherit the company, the woman who knew every bolt and blueprint in that place, then who was I? I didn't know yet, but I did know one thing. I was not going to disappear quietly. Not for my father, not for Vanessa, and definitely not for Brandon. Shock would come first, then grief, then anger. And after that, planning. Because if there's one thing I learned from building a company from scratch, it's this. Once you understand the system, you also understand exactly how to beat it. I started the car, pulled out of the lot, and drove away from the life I'd spent 14 years constructing, with no idea that I was about to build something far bigger without him. For the first 3 days after my father fired me, I didn't leave my apartment. I didn't shower. I didn't answer calls. I didn't respond to the 27 text messages from Ethan that ranged from, "Love, are you okay?" to, "Sienna, please talk to me." I lay on the couch with a blanket over my head, like a child hiding from monsters. Except the monster wasn't under the bed. It had my father's voice and my stepbrother's smug smile. Shock is strange. It doesn't always look like crying or yelling. Sometimes it looks like staring at a wall for 9 hours, your body frozen while your mind loops the same moment over and over. Brandon is being promoted to COO. Your position is eliminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Every time I blinked, I heard it again. By the 5th day, shock had given way to the kind of grief that settles in your bones, the kind that feels like moving through mud. I tried to make coffee and started crying because I couldn't find the filter. I tried to fold laundry and ended up sitting on the floor holding one of my old company t-shirts like it was a dead pet. Ethan stopped by with dinner. I didn't answer the door. He slid it into my mailbox, texted "I love you," and left me alone. I told myself I needed space. The truth? I didn't know how to let someone love me when I felt so discarded. On day 7, I woke up angry. Not fiery, dramatic anger. Not the kind you throw at people. This was worse. Quiet, sharp, and clarifying. The kind that organizes itself. I got out of bed, showered, pulled on jeans and a sweater, and sat at my dining table, still the same table where I'd worked countless nights on production reports and quarterly analyses, and opened my laptop. If my father could erase me from his company in a 15-minute meeting, then I could erase the version of myself who believed that company was the only place I existed. I started typing. Not a resignation letter, not a complaint, a blueprint for a new company. One built the way my father and I used to dream about, back before Vanessa and Brandon, before buzzwords and power grabs and political games. A company where the people mattered, where quality mattered, where ethics weren't negotiable. I didn't know if the plan was realistic. I didn't know if I had the money, the investors, the staff. But I knew this. I understood the industry. I understood the clients. I understood every weakness in my father's company because I'd spent years trying to fix them. And I knew precisely how to build something better. I was on page 6 of my notes when my phone buzzed. Patricia. I considered ignoring it, but something in me, some old muscle memory of respect, made me answer. Sienna? I exhaled shakily. Hey, are you alive? Barely. I meant what I said, she continued, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. He made his choice. But you're not done. So, what's your next move? I looked at the laptop screen, at the blueprint, at the version of my future that was starting to take shape, pixel by pixel. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that maybe I don't join another company. You shouldn't, she said immediately. Any place that hires you will expect you to rebuild what you already built, for them, with nothing to show for it. I'm thinking, I said again, hands trembling, that maybe I start my own. There was a beat of silence. Then Patricia laughed, a breathless, incredulous, delighted laugh. Tell me where and when, she said. I'm in. In? I repeated. Patricia, you've been with my father for 14 years. I've been with you, technically, she corrected. Robert just came with the package. The truth in her voice hit me like a tidal wave. I know at least 4 people who would follow you tomorrow, she added. Kenneth included. I closed my eyes. Kenneth, the lead design engineer who had left because Brandon overrode safety standards. The man who had once told me, I trust you more than anyone in this industry. The man who walked away not because he wanted to, but because he couldn't attach his name to incompetence. 4 people, I whispered. Try more, she said. People are waiting for you to make a move. When the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I started making a list. Potential founding team. Patricia, CFO. Kenneth, lead engineer. 2 former account managers. A production supervisor I trusted. I spent the next week reaching out. Carefully, secretly, one person at a time. Coffee shops, back booths in quiet diners, walks in parks. Not one person hesitated. Every single one of them said yes. Tell me where to sign. Tell me when to start. Tell me what you need. I created a pitch deck, a business plan, a projected timeline. I mapped out the first-year budget, equipment needs, vendor options, facility requirements. And then, 2 weeks later, fate, or whatever force guides broken people toward opportunity, intervened. It came in the form of Helen Richardson, a member of my father's board, a quiet investor, a woman who had watched Brandon's rise with alarm and my father's decisions with disbelief. She asked to meet me for lunch. We sat in a small Italian restaurant downtown. She ordered soup. I ordered nothing. My stomach was a fist. I heard what happened, she said calmly, stirring her spoon. What your father did was unconscionable. I looked at the tablecloth. He made his choice. He made a terrible one, Helen said, and I want to know what you plan to do next. I slid my laptop across the table, hand steady, voice steady, heart anything but, and said, I plan to build a company that actually deserves to survive. She read my proposal silently for 5 minutes. Then she closed the laptop. I'll fund this, she said. My breath caught. You what? I'll fund it, she repeated, and I'll bring in 3 other investors I trust if you'll have them. I stared at her. This woman, who had sat next to my father in boardrooms, who had once defended him during a dispute over expansion costs, was offering to back me. Not him, me. Do you believe in this? She asked quietly. Yes, I whispered. I believe in it enough to bet my entire life on it. Good, she said, sliding the laptop back toward me. Because your father destroyed the company he built. You have a chance to build something better. And just like that, we were no longer talking about money. We were talking about legacy. 4 months later, we launched our company, Caldwell Systems Renewal, renamed to fit the narrative twist. Caldwell had always meant something to me, and this time it was mine. We started with 15 employees. We offered equity stakes. We promised profit sharing from day one. We built a culture around transparency, integrity, and quality. No shortcuts, no favoritism, no manipulation, no Vanessa, no Brandon. When we opened our first facility, I stood on the mezzanine looking down at the engineers, the line workers, the supervisors setting up equipment, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Steadiness, purpose, belonging that wasn't contingent on someone else's approval. Patricia walked up beside me. Feels good, doesn't it? I nodded. Feels like mine. She smirked. Well, technically 12% of it is mine. I laughed. A real laughs. The first one that felt natural since the day I left my father's office. Down on the floor, Kenneth called up to us. Hey, boss, this place is going to blow your father's operation out of the water. I didn't argue, because something in my gut, something sharp and certain, told me he was right. But I didn't know just how right he was, because while we were growing, thriving, and building something rooted in actual competence, my father's empire was already starting to rot from the inside. And the person swinging the hammer that finally brought it crashing down wasn't me. It was the son he'd chosen over me, Brandon. And the ruin he caused was only the beginning. By the time our company hit its 6-month mark, I was running mostly on adrenaline, determination, and the ridiculous amount of caffeine Patricia insisted was an operational necessity. We weren't just surviving, we were growing. New clients were reaching out. Former colleagues were emailing me. Suppliers who'd once worked with Caldwell Refrigeration were, very quietly, slipping me price sheets with a wink and a call me anytime. But the real shift came about 7 months in. It started with a headline. Major grocery chain reports millions in losses after cooling system failure. I clicked immediately. My heart didn't race. It didn't drop. It didn't do anything dramatic. It just paused. Then I read the full story. A massive refrigeration failure during a heat wave. Thousands of pounds of produce spoiled. Millions lost. A full shutdown of stores across 3 states. The cooling units, manufactured by Caldwell Refrigeration Systems. The cause? A batch of cheap, low-quality overseas components Brandon had switched to for cost optimization. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply leaned back in my chair and whispered. I warned him. Patricia appeared in my doorway a second later, holding a printout of the same article. It gets better, she said, handing me another sheet. Look, a public statement from the grocery chain. We have lost confidence in Caldwell Refrigeration Systems after repeated failures and quality concerns. Repeated. Not accidental, not isolated, repeated. So that's Riverside, I murmured, and the Northern Foods account. And 2 more, Patricia said. They're hemorrhaging clients. I exhaled slowly. They brought this on themselves. Patricia smirked. Oh, honey, they're just getting started. Over the next 3 months, the industry buzz turned into something louder, something closer to a warning siren. Every week, another whisper reached us. Brandon had cut 2 more safety inspections. Brandon had reprimanded engineers for wasting time on quality checks. Brandon had overridden the maintenance director's concerns about shipment delays. Brandon had dismissed an account manager for raising red flags. If incompetence had a face, it looked exactly like the man who'd called me resistant to innovation. Word spread fast in manufacturing. One mistake is unfortunate. 2 is concerning. 3 becomes gossip. 10 becomes fact. And in less than a year, it was fact. Clients didn't trust Caldwell. Employees didn't trust Caldwell. Vendors didn't trust Caldwell. And investors, they were panicking. But the worst part? They deserved every bit of it. Meanwhile, my company, Caldwell Systems Renewal, was becoming known for something else entirely. Integrity, precision, transparency. The values my father once taught me before he forgot them. We didn't steal clients. We didn't sabotage anything. We didn't poach employees. We didn't have to. People came to us willingly. One morning, Andre, the warehouse supervisor who had once been my right hand, showed up at our door. He stood there in a blue work jacket, hat in hand, voice steady. "Sienna, I'd like to come home." I didn't hug him. He wasn't that kind of man. But I did put a hand on his shoulder. "Welcome back." Within 6 months, we'd hired a dozen former Caldwell employees, only the ones who applied voluntarily, never once recruited. Each one said the same thing. "I want to work somewhere that knows what it's doing. I'm tired of cleaning up Brandon's mistakes. I miss the culture we used to have." One even said, "I came for the paycheck. I stayed for what this place feels like." That one nearly made me cry. But the biggest shift came not from people, but from the numbers. By year 2, our revenue hit $11 million. We had 53 employees. Our retention rate? 98%. Not because we were perfect. God knows we had our chaotic days. But because we treated people like human beings instead of chess pieces. Meanwhile, Caldwell Refrigeration was imploding. Patricia walked into my office one morning carrying a stack of industry reports. "You should see this," she said, dropping them on my desk. I flipped through the pages. Layoffs. 35% of workforce inventory shortages due to failed optimization system. Client complaints, up 240%, missed production deadlines. 3 supplier contracts terminated. It didn't even look like the company I had built my life around. "What happened to Robert?" I asked quietly. "Rumor is he's burnt out," Patricia said. "Overworked, aging fast, won't admit it." "And Vanessa?" Patricia's lips curled slightly. "Seeing divorce lawyers." Of course she was. Her loyalty had always been directly proportional to the company's profit margin. "And Brandon?" I asked. "Still COO," she said. "Still wrecking the place." Last week he suggested eliminating 40% of the engineering team to reduce fixed costs. I stared at her. That would kill the company. She raised her brows. "Exactly." I rubbed my eyes. "I tried to warn them." "You did warn them," she said. "They just didn't care." The collapse came faster than anyone expected. 3.5 years after the day I was escorted out by security, Caldwell Refrigeration Systems filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The news didn't hit like a punch. It hit like silence. Like someone had dropped a stone into a well and there was no splash, just a void where water should have been. I read the announcement twice. My father's company was gone. The business he built from nothing. The one I had poured 14 years into. The one my mother had believed would be my inheritance. Destroyed in less than 4 years. By the man he replaced me with. Brandon resigned immediately after the filing. Coward. He tried to get hired at competing companies, but this industry has a flawless memory. Word spreads like fire in dry grass. Everywhere he applied, he was politely rejected. Last I heard, he was freelancing as a consultant, taking on efficiency audits for small firms who didn't know his name yet. Give them time. They would. Vanessa divorced my father 8 months after the bankruptcy. Clean break. She got the house I grew up in. The one with my mother's rose bushes, the one where I learned to ride my bike, the one I had to pretend not to love after Vanessa redecorated it beyond recognition. My father moved into a small, aging apartment across town. He went from a 5-bedroom home with a manicured lawn and to a place above a liquor store and a discount nail salon. It might have been sad if it weren't so predictable. When the bankruptcy trustee sold off Caldwell Refrigeration's manufacturing assets, our company, my company, submitted a bid on the specialized equipment. The machines I used to operate myself. The ones my father taught me to use when I was 17. The ones he'd once said would carry us into the future. And we won the auction. I stood in the factory as the machines were delivered, rusted a little, scratched from years of mishandling, but still familiar down to every bolt and corner. I touched the side of one compressor unit and whispered, "You're home." My employees probably thought I was being sentimental. Maybe I was, but it wasn't the machine I was talking to. It was the version of myself who'd learned on it. The girl who trusted her father. The young woman who believed loyalty meant something. The VP who thought she'd spend her life in that company. Now I own the physical pieces of my past. And the person who'd once stolen my future? He had nothing left to steal. But the story wasn't done, because the universe has an unsettling sense of timing and poetic symmetry. And my father, broken, alone, humiliated, wasn't finished with me yet. The call came at 1:30 in the morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, vibrating against the wood like it was panicking. At first I ignored it. Ethan had learned not to call this late unless something was on fire, and nobody else had any business reaching me at that hour. But it kept buzzing, again and again. I groaned, rolled over, and squinted at the screen. Dad, Robert. For a moment I thought I was still dreaming. Then the buzzing stopped and started again immediately. A second call, a drunk person's call. I considered silencing the phone, turning it face down, letting the past stay where it belonged. But something, habit, curiosity, or maybe the last splinter of the daughter I used to be, made me swipe to answer. I held the phone to my ear. What do you want, Robert? There was a pause, a shaky breath, and then, I made a mistake, he slurred. Sienna, sweetheart, I made such a terrible mistake. The word sweetheart hit me like a blow. He hadn't called me that since before Vanessa entered our lives. Vanessa manipulated me, he continued, voice cracking. And Brandon, he wasn't ready. He never was. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you. I closed my eyes, letting silence fill the space between us. 4 years too late. 4 years of distance. 4 years of watching everything collapse exactly the way I had warned him it would. Can we fix this? He whispered, desperate. I'm your father. We're family. Family. I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound that startled even me. You stopped being my father when you chose them over me, I said quietly. When you handed my career to Brandon. When you fired me and called me dramatic. When you let your wife treat me like a threat instead of your daughter. I know, he sobbed. I know. Please, Sienna, I have nothing left. I need you. No, I said, the words slicing through the air like glass. You need the stability I built without you. You need the success you threw away, but you don't need me. You never needed me, not until your world collapsed. He sucked in a breath as if wounded. Sienna, I'm hanging up now. Please. But I ended the call. He called again and again, 4 more times. Each time I let it ring. 2 months passed before I saw him again. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had just left a meeting with a vendor and stopped at Whole Foods to grab lunch. Roasted chicken, some vegetables, nothing dramatic. I was scanning the shelf for a bottle of sparkling water when someone behind me whispered, Sienna? The voice stopped me cold. I turned. My father stood there beside a cart holding a few groceries, generic bread, canned soup, a couple of apples. He looked small, older. The kind of older that comes not from age, but from defeat. His hair, once dark and thick, had gone almost completely gray. His shirt was wrinkled, and the jacket he wore was one I hadn't seen since my 20s, a worn navy thing with a stitched-on Caldwell refrigeration logo. A relic from a world that no longer existed. Sienna, he said again, softer this time. Robert, I replied. I didn't call him Dad. I couldn't. He swallowed. I heard about your company, Caldwell Systems Renewal. You're doing remarkably well. Yes, I said simply. We are. That's... He nodded awkwardly. That's good. You deserved it. You always did. I didn't thank him. He shifted his weight. You look strong. I am. He stared at the floor tiles. I know I can't fix what I did. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know I'm proud of you. I felt nothing. Not warmth, not pain, just clarity. You taught me how to be a leader, I said quietly. How to treat people with dignity. How to build something that mattered. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. And then, I continued, you forgot everything you taught me. He flinched as though I'd slapped him. I know, he whispered. I know I was a fool. You weren't a fool, I said. You were a coward. You let Vanessa rewrite your values. You let Brandon dictate your decisions. And you let both of them destroy everything we built. His breath hitched, a man crushed by the weight of his own mistakes. Can't we... He tried again, voice strained. Can't we start over? Just a conversation, a coffee, a dinner, something. No, I said simply. Tears filled his eyes, and for a moment I saw the man he used to be. The father who taught me how to read blueprints, who bought me my first set of insulated gloves, who believed in me long before I believed in myself. But that man was gone. You made sure some things can't be fixed, I said gently, and that's not my burden to carry. Sienna, please. Goodbye, Robert. I left him standing there in the aisle between sparkling water and organic snacks, hands trembling on the grocery cart. I didn't look back. Not once. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a baptism. I walked to my car, steady steps, steady breath, and slid into the driver's seat. My phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Dinner tonight? I miss you." I smiled, something soft, something new. I typed back, "Yes, I'd like that." Because for the first time in years, I wasn't looking backward. I was walking toward the life I built myself, toward the company that operated with integrity, toward the people who trusted me, toward the man who loved me, not my work schedule, toward a future where I was no longer someone's second choice, sacrifice, or stepping stone. Caldwell Systems Renewal is now valued at over $22 million. We're expanding into a second manufacturing facility in Phoenix. We've earned a reputation built on competence, respect, and quality. Everything my father's company once stood for before he forgot who he was. Sometimes I still grieve the father I had before Vanessa, the man he used to be, the version of us that existed before loyalty became optional. But grief isn't a weakness. It's a release. Because letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting their choices destroy you. So here's my question for you. If your own father threw away everything you built together, chose his new family over you, fired you, humiliated you, replaced you, and only came crawling back after losing it all, would you let him return to your life? Or would you walk away like I did? Some bridges once burned are never rebuilt. And sometimes that is exactly how it should be.